Verily I say unto you, the era of the sword and axe is nigh, the era of the wolf's blizzard, the time of the white chill and the white light is nigh, the time of madness and the time of contempt. Ted Theory, the time of end. The world will die amidst frost and be reborn with a new sun. It will be reborn of the elder blood, of hen Ichea, of the seed that has been sown, a seed which will not sprout, but will burst into flame. Es tuathes. Thus it shall be. Watch for the signs. What signs these shall be, I say unto you. First, the earth will flow with the blood of Alexandria, the blood of Elves. And Ithlin Ispia, Ithlin Eglarib Evian's prophecy. Hey guys, welcome back. Today we discuss The Witcher Season 2. The first season of The Witcher suffered from a confusing array of short story inserts, convoluted narratives, crisscrossing timelines, and a continent full of peoples and monsters, all of which, to non-book readers, would have appeared to come out of nowhere. I think as much as many people enjoyed the first season, the sheer volume of material tossed at them in such a dizzying way definitely weakened its first impression. Season 2 demonstrates that some lessons were learned. The timelines are more linear, the characters we meet are framed with a bit more detail as to who and what they are. We also get more backstory about how this world came to be and the challenges they've all faced as each new group has struggled to survive. We're introduced to a looming prophecy that we know will shape the future or destiny of our main characters. Unfortunately, one of the biggest complaints I have of this season is that it's weighed down by tons of exposition and uninteresting B-plots, namely surrounding Nilfgaard and the treatment of the elves. These stories certainly have a place, but don't require nearly the attention and detail they receive, and often feel more like setup for a future season than points moving the present story forward. Ciri and Geralt's journey is what captivates audiences. It's what draws us into the story. If The Witcher is to survive another season, then that is the most important lesson of all. But as a huge Witcher fan, I wanted to share with you some of my favorite moments from the series. Season 2's premiere episode, A Grain of Truth, adapts a dark Beauty and the Beast type story where Geralt comes across Nivellen, a man cursed to appear as a monster. Only it's not true love's kiss that frees him from the curse, but instead it's true love lost as penalty for his own cruelty. If you recall last season, the show explored Renfri's story, who will forever remain in my eyes Geralt's true love, his soulmate, a Snow White believing herself too broken by her past for anyone to save. The short stories are all deeply emotional. They encapsulate the novel's main themes: the nature of man and beast, destiny and redemption, love and loss. The Witcher series can be thought of not only as entertainment, but as a retrospective on the human condition. Another scene I enjoyed was how the show adapted the first scene of the first official book in the series, Blood of Elves. Geralt and Ciri are on the road, camping in front of a fire. Ciri awakens from a nightmare. The dialogue is changed, but the idea is the same. This child, just 10 or so at this point in the novel, aged up for the show, has watched everything she knew and loved literally burn to the ground and nearly died herself. The book shows us what Geralt means to Ciri as he saves and comforts her, but the show more explicitly details what she means to Geralt, which I think was a nice touch. For those wondering, here's how that scene plays out in the book. The town was in flames. The narrow streets leading to the moat and the first terrace belched smoke and embers, flames devouring the densely clustered thatched houses and licking at the castle walls. From the west, from the harbor gate, the screams and clamor of vicious battle and the dull blows of a battering ram smashing against the walls grew ever louder. Their attackers had surrounded them unexpectedly, shattering the barricades which had been held by no more than a few soldiers, a handful of townsmen carrying halberds, and some crossbowmen from the guild. Their horses, decked out in flowing black caparisons, flew over the barricades like specters, their riders bright glistening blades sowing death amongst the fleeing defenders. Theory felt the knight who carried her before him on his saddle abruptly spur his horse. She heard his cry. "Hold on," he shouted. "Hold on." A fall, a shock, painful bruising against armor, hooves pounded past her, a horse's belly and a frayed girth flashing by above her head, then another horse's belly and a flowing black caparison. Grunts of exertion like a lumberjack's when chopping wood, but this isn't wood, it's iron against iron. A shout, muffled and dull, and something huge and black collapsed into the mud next to her with a splash, spurting blood. An armored foot quivered, thrashed, goring the earth with an enormous spur. A jerk. Some force plucked her up, pulled her onto another saddle. "Hold on!" Again, the bone-shaking speed, the mad gallop, arms and legs desperately searching for support. The horse rears. "Hold on!" There is no support. There is blood. The horse falls. It's impossible to jump aside, no way to break free, to escape the tight embrace of these chainmail-clad arms. There's no way to avoid the blood pouring onto her head and over her shoulders. A jolt, the squelch of mud, a violent collision with the ground, horrifically still after the furious ride. The horse's harrowing wheezes and squeals as it tries to regain its feet. The pounding of horseshoes, fetlocks, and hooves flashing past, black caparisons and cloaks shouting. The street is on fire, a roaring red wall of flame. Silhouetted before it, a rider towers over the flaming roofs, enormous. His black caparisoned horse prances, tosses its head, neighs. The rider stares down at her. Theory sees his eyes gleaming through the slit in his huge helmet, framed by a bird of prey's wings. She sees the fire reflected in the broad blade of the sword held in his lowered hand. "Theory!" She woke, numb and drenched in sweat, with her scream, the scream which had woken her, still hanging in the air, still vibrating somewhere within her, beneath her breastbone and burning against her parched throat. Her hands ached, clenched around the blanket. Her back ached. "Theory, calm down." The night was dark and windy. The crowns of the surrounding pine trees rustled steadily and melodiously, their limbs and trunks creaking in the wind. There was no malevolent fire, no screams, only this gentle lullaby. Beside her, the campfire flickered with light and warmth, its reflected flames glowing from harness buckles gleaming red in the leather-wrapped and iron-banded hilt of the sword leaning against the saddle on the ground. There was no other fire and no other iron. The hand against her cheek smelled of leather and ashes, not of blood. "Girl?" It was just a dream, a bad dream. Siri shuddered violently, curling her arms and legs up tight. A dream, just a dream. The campfire had already died down. The birch logs were red and luminous, occasionally crackling, giving off tiny spurts of blue flame which illuminated the white hair and sharp profile of the man wrapping a blanket and sheepskin around her. "Geralt, I'm right here. Sleep, Siri. You have to rest. We've still a long way ahead of us." Then you have episode 2, Kaer Morhen, the ancestral home and training ground for witchers belonging to the School of the Wolf. When Geralt and Ciri make it to the fortress, we're introduced to his childhood friends and brothers. Seeing Geralt home again and united with Lambert and Cohen, and especially Vesemir, the mentor and father figure to them all, was heartwarming. You feel Geralt deserves this after everything they've been through, and Ciri as well. However, for many fans, this reunion was ruined by the absolute worst part of this entire episode, maybe the entire series, and that is the portrayal of Eskel. Eskel and Geralt are supposed to be near mirror images of one another, except that Eskel is severely scarred. Here, he's small and scrawny by comparison, and the scarring isn't as extreme, but bad casting aside, not exactly a first for the series, Eskel is supposed to be a bit less reserved than Geralt personality-wise, but still honorable at heart. He's a good and decent guy. Here, the character is wildly impudent, inviting prostitutes to Kaer Morhen and clashing with Geralt seemingly out of jealousy and resentment and senseless rage. We do find out later that he's been infected by a tree-like leshy monster, but as one Twitter user noted, this superficial personality is literally how the character was cast, and it's nothing like the Eskel we know. By the end, Geralt is forced to take his life. The decision to end the character in such a disgraceful way has fans reeling. They did our boy Eskel so dirty by killing him off right away, especially when there were a bunch of background witchers who could have had that plot, one fan said on Reddit. I knew Netflix would change things from the books, so I was prepared, but Eskel being a mean womanizer who brought girls to Kaer Morhen and threw a party wasn't one of them, said one fan on Twitter. Why? Why would you do this to a character the entire fandom loves already and was gonna welcome with open arms? Do you have any idea what Eskel means to a lot of us? The episode ends with the reveal that Yennefer no longer has her power, which puts her on a rather dark path toward the season's conclusion. And then there's Ciri, who sets off on a new path of her own, as not simply a princess, but her warrior queen of a grandmother's lion cub and witcher in training. Episodes 3 and 4 are titled What is Lost and Redanian Intelligence. These delve mainly into the politics of the world, the plight of the elves, their alignment with Nilfgaard, the mages and their power plays, blah blah blah. I mean, again, all of this has its part in the story, but the show lingers far too long there. The one bright spot is Jaskier, who we meet when Yennefer, having escaped into the Elven Underground Railroad, encounters him along the way. They have this discussion about why exactly he cares so much about the elves, and in response he refers to his experience at the Great Oak of Bleobaris, the seat of friendship, before it was raided. In the show, he describes it as a place where everyone was welcome and where everyone was able to speak freely. But in the books, we see that the social reality of that space was a bit more complex. The Druids protecting the ancient tree called it the seat of friendship and willingly welcomed all comers. But even during an event as exceptional as the world-famous Troubadour's just concluded performance, the travelers kept to themselves, remaining in clearly delineated groups. Elves stayed with elves. Dwarvish craftsmen gathered with their kin, who were often hired to protect the merchant caravans and were armed to the teeth. Their groups tolerated at best the gnome miners and halfling farmers who camped beside them. All non-humans were uniformly distant toward humans. The humans repaid in kind, but were not seen to mix amongst themselves either. Nobility looked down on the merchants and traveling salesmen with open scorn, while soldiers and mercenaries distanced themselves from shepherds in their reeking sheepskins. The few wizards and their disciples kept themselves entirely apart from the others and bestowed their arrogance on everyone in equal parts. A tight-knit, dark, and silent group of peasants lurked in the background. Resembling a forest with their rakes, pitchforks, and flails poking above their heads, they were ignored by all and sundry. The exception, as ever, was the children. Interestingly, another bright spot at this point in the show is that we finally see Triss with classic red hair. It took long enough and enough complaints, I'm sure. As an aside, we also learn that Triss is in love with Geralt, but the feeling isn't quite mutual despite the obvious attraction, because he's toxically attached to Yennefer. And he's, I guess, basically in mourning over what he still believes to be her death. It was funny and sad, and yet so Geralt. The other highlight of these episodes was Ciri's training as she engaged in brutal tests of skill and will. She tries and fails, and she gets up and tries again, but she's young and impatient and probably reminds Geralt a little of himself at that age as he tries to teach her not only how to fight, but how to survive. We also get to see more of Ciri's own apocalyptic visions of what we come to learn is this prophecy. By episode 6, 7, and 8, I feel the seasons tend to unravel a bit in terms of knowing what to do or where to go with the plot, and frankly, what to do with Geralt, which is why his role seems a bit more diminished than usual at the end. The focus shifts to literally everyone discovering what Ciri is and coming for her. This culminates on an attack on Vesemir by the fire mage who kidnapped Jaskier. We find out that he stole the vial of her blood and then attacks the temple Geralt's carried to in order to steal the rest of her. Yen too shows up at the temple, presumably to nab the girl for herself, part of a bargain to get her powers back. Geralt doesn't realize this at first because he's of course blinded by the toxicity that is Yen. Yen, for her part, does help the girl learn to control her magic in order for them to escape, only to lure her back to the very danger Geralt has been desperate for her to avoid the entire season. Geralt reunites with Jazz and the dwarves to follow them pretty much back to square one, and honestly, the best part of these last few episodes, besides Yen's manipulation, was the boss battle at the very end. Aptly named Family, we learn that the elves have lost their first and only pureblood child in a generation as their deal with Nilfgaard falls apart around them. They brutally retaliate against their former human allies. At the same time, we learn that the now freed witch has possessed Ciri, causing her to take the lives of several of the few witchers that are left. Her adopted family band together to intervene. In turn, Ciri has to abandon the illusion of the family she lost to return to the one who has her back now, only for the audience to learn her family story isn't quite what she thought. Final thoughts. I thoroughly enjoyed the season, with the exception of the complaints I raised in the beginning about how it kind of mishandled the political aspect of the story. It was still quite good and better than most of what we get on TV today. While it's true that Ciri is the focus in the books, Geralt is the star of this show, so reducing his character to co-star level, relegating him to bystander or cheerleader, doesn't really help maintain audience attention, including mine. My mind wanted to yada 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 past a lot of the overt effort at building up lesser characters, namely the mages and their scheming, and get back to watching Ciri and Geralt monster hunt together. The transformation with the potions just never gets old. It's moments like those that I believe fans live for with the series. I mean, I get it, you have some strong female characters, but they're not the point of the show. And artificially constructing greater purpose around them, like the girl power scenes with Fringilla and the Elf Queen, doesn't change that. All in all, I would recommend the Witcher series. If they can balance a desire to appear well-rounded with the desire of audiences to see Geralt the Witcher be a Witcher, it'll definitely have a lot to offer in the coming season. But hey, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks for joining me. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.